You people can't even read." The judge laughs in open court, pointing at the old black janitor. The room joins in, mocking him as if he is nothing, a man with a mop, a man beneath their notice. They think he has no voice, no knowledge, no worth. But what they don't know is that this same janitor once stood at the front of that courtroom as an attorney. He walked away from it all for truth and justice. Now, faced with open humiliation, a hidden past is about to shock everyone watching. For most people in the courthouse, he was invisible. An old black janitor, moving quietly from room to room, mop in hand, eyes down, never causing trouble. He had worked this job for years, choosing silence over attention. To those who passed by, he was just another face they would never remember. But his story was not ordinary. Long before he pushed that mop, he had stood in those same halls as an attorney. Sharp mind, steady voice, a man who believed in truth and justice. He had fought cases that others were too afraid to touch, speaking up when silence was safer. And for that, he paid the price. Framed in a legal battle meant to destroy him, he had been dragged through years of humiliation. Yet somehow, against all odds, he won. Still, victory came at a cost. Betrayed, exhausted, and disillusioned, he gave up his license and walked away from the career he once loved. All he wanted now was peace, a quiet life far from the courtroom drama that had once consumed him. Yet peace has a way of being disturbed. Working as a janitor in the very courthouse where he once commanded respect, he now faced a different kind of trial. Not in front of a jury, but under the sneering gaze of a judge who saw him as nothing more than a target for ridicule. The laughter in the courtroom did not stop. The judge's words, meant as a joke, had turned the room into a stage for cruelty. Lawyers smirked, clerks hid their chuckles, and even jurors exchanged glances. All eyes fell on the old janitor who stood silently in the corner with his mop bucket. He did not answer back. He never did. Every insult rolled over him like water, every glance of disdain treated as background noise. That was the piece he had chosen, invisibility. Yet inside, the sting was sharp. Not because the judge mocked him, but because the same walls that once echoed his arguments now echoed laughter at his expense. It wasn't the first time. Day after day, he endured the same whispers. Why is he even here? He's probably never finished high school. Does he even know what those papers mean? The same people who dismissed him now relied on his quiet presence to clean their messes. They never imagined the mind behind the mop, but fate has a way of breaking silence. On this day, a case unfolded before him that stirred something long buried. He recognized the tactics instantly, a prosecutor twisting facts, a defense crumbling under pressure, and a defendant, young, scared, and black, cornered by a system that had already decided his fate. The judge smirked, dismissing objections, rushing the process. It was not justice. It was theater. The janitor's grip on his mop tightened. He told himself to stay quiet, to let it pass. This was no longer his fight. But the words from the bench echoed louder. You people can't even read. It wasn't just aimed at him anymore. It was aimed at every black life standing trial in that room. His heart pounded. He saw the young man's mother in the back row, clutching her hands, eyes brimming with helpless tears. He had seen that look before, in other mothers, in other trials. And each time, he had promised himself never again. The judge leaned back, satisfied, confident that no one would challenge him. But then something unexpected happened. The janitor set aside his mop, wiped his hands on his worn apron, and stepped forward. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Heads turned. Murmurs filled the air. What was the janitor doing? He walked past the rows of polished lawyers and stunned clerks, stopping at the edge of the defense table. Every step was a defiance. Every movement a reminder that silence had its limits. And then, he reached into his pocket. The room fell still. What he pulled out next would change everything. The courtroom froze as the old janitor pulled a folded envelope from his pocket. Hands trembled across the benches, whispers erupted, and the judge narrowed his eyes, suddenly uneasy. From that envelope, the janitor revealed documents, aged but unmistakable. A bar certification. Case records with his name stamped in bold. proof that he had once stood where the lawyers now sat, not as a servant, but as a defender of justice. The judge's smirk faltered. His words, "You people can't even read," now hung in the air like poison exposed to light. Everyone in that courtroom could see the truth. The man they had mocked, the man they had dismissed, had once been a respected attorney who had fought battles none of them had dared to fight. The janitor's silence carried more weight than any argument. He didn't shout, didn't gloat. He simply laid the papers on the defense table, a quiet declaration that dignity cannot be erased. For the young defendant and his mother, it was a lifeline. For the clerks and lawyers, it was a shock that shattered their arrogance. And for the judge, it was humiliation, raw and undeniable. His laughter was gone, replaced by the one thing he never expected to feel in his own courtroom: fear. All eyes locked on the old man, standing tall without a title, without a robe, without power, yet commanding more respect than anyone in that room. The silence stretched, heavy, unbreakable, and then with a steady voice that carried the weight of years, the janitor spoke only once. The words stopped hearts, silenced whispers, and left the judge frozen in his chair. The courtroom never returned to laughter that day. The judge, once so quick to mock, sat frozen in silence, stripped of the power his words once carried. The clerks looked down, ashamed. The lawyers avoided eye contact. The young defendant, who moments earlier seemed lost to the system, now saw hope flicker in the form of a janitor who was far more than what they assumed. The old man gathered his papers, folded them neatly, and returned them to his pocket. He did not wait for applause, nor for apologies. He did not seek recognition. His dignity had already been restored the moment the truth was revealed. For him, this was not about pride. It was about showing that justice, though buried, still had a voice. He picked up his mop again, resuming the work they thought defined him. But the room had changed. Everyone who witnessed it knew they would never look at him, or their own prejudices, the same way again. And that is the heart of this story. Racism thrives in assumptions, in the way society chooses who is seen and who is dismissed. A man once respected was reduced to invisibility simply because of the color of his skin and the job he held. Yet in a single moment, he reminded them, and us, that worth is never measured by titles, uniforms, or status. How many brilliant voices have been silenced because someone decided they couldn't read? How many lives have been buried under arrogance and hate? And how many more will it take before we finally learn that dignity cannot be erased by racism? The answer is not in the courtroom. It's in us.